Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm at a park about like 4 miles from where I live. Not really sure where, but I'm in France, evidently, still. It is April and I am looking at this tree here. So this is a tree that I found pretty easy to identify. It is the field elm, Ulmus minor. I believe it goes by some other common names, but that's what came up on iNat when I first identified it. And I identified it back in like January based off of this bark, which I found to be very unique and notable, which has these ridges on it, at least in this small one, and especially is noticeable on its twigs, on its branching. And at first I thought it was like, in the US we have like winged euonymus, the burning bush has very kind of similar twigs, so I thought maybe it was that. But no, it's the field elm. And now that it's spring and the leaves are coming out, I can tell more that it does resemble kind of, in some ways, the like slippery elm that we have in the US and the American elm as well, in terms of its leaf being kind of this, having this asymmetric base and being doubly toothed. And in terms of texture, the texture of this leaf is kind of rough as well. And the leaves are even kind of almost ridged in a way, similar to the bark, and kind of have these little, rough marks to them as well. I'm not sure if they have wing euonymus or something similar as well around here in France, or if there's any other tree that has a similar bark, but this is very distinctive, to me at least. Another thing of note about the field elm is the there aren't any on here as far as I can tell, but the seeds are kind of like these, they have like this red seed in the middle. It's a samara, surrounded by like a green wing. Kind of looks like an eyeball, where like the seed is the pupil or the iris of the eyeball. Kind of looks like the the tree of heaven's seeds, if you're familiar with those. But I don't see any on this elm, unfortunately. One other thing I wanted to note about the field elm was that the Dutch elm disease does seem to have been having some effect on them in terms of causing some decline, at least in the United Kingdom. But it seems to depend kind of on the specific, like, kind of strain or whatever, of field elm and like location and stuff, which is interesting. Here's another tree that I absolutely love. I didn't do any research on it before this though. It's the common hawthorn, Crataegnus monogina or something like that. I'll put the scientific name down. I'm not entirely sure if that's right. But I see so many of the common hawthorns around, and they're also kind of easy to ID based off the bark, because this one kind of seems like an older one, honestly. Look how big it is, my god. But just because the bark is thorned, hence the name common hawthorn. I saw also there's like blackthorn as well. It's like a kind of more of a shrub that also has thorns, so but it does have thorns, which kind of help identify it. And then the leaves are also very kind of easy to identify. The one tree that kind of has similar leaves is the field maple. I've seen some of that, but with the thorns in addition to it, and also the fact that it's I assume the common hawthorn is alternately arranged, kind of help distinguish it. but the leaves are kind of like, I don't know what you would call them. They're definitely lobed. But yeah, they're lobed. I don't know. I'm sure there's some scientific way to describe these leaves, but this is what they look like. Around May, so maybe like a month from now, hawthorn usually has these white flowers that bloom, and then later on in the year we'll get red berries or hermaphrodites. And I listened to a really good podcast, completely arbitrary podcast episode on the common hawthorn, and they're these symbols of kind of fertility, at least in like the UK and such, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, this is a pretty good common hawthorn specimen in my opinion. One of the bigger ones I've seen. Here's another hawthorn, I think, I found farther down that has bits that look like are going to become flowers. And it also has the red berry I was talking about. So here's a good example of the field maple, Acer Camp Stair, right next to a hawthorn. How similar I think their leaves can kind of look at least a passing glance. But one good way to tell the difference is the maple has opposite branching, and the hawthorn has alternate branching. Also, the hawthorn has thorns, and this field maple has little flowers. Good morning. Today we are looking at this tree here, which I think this one in particular at least has kind of that iconic form you might see. And I mean that in terms of it having a kind of broad crown and these lower limbs. Anyway, this tree is the English oak, Quercus robur, also called the pedunculate oak. So the leaves of the English oak, the leaves look like honestly look like a white oak leaf to me, like just the one you'd see in the US. I assume they're in that white oak kind of subgroup of the Quercus genus. And even though it's April, they're still holding on to their leaves, which is interesting. In fact, a lot of the English oaks I've found still have their leaves, which is, yeah, interesting when a lot of trees don't. This is April 19th maybe. And these are the baby leaves kind of coming out, so it's quite late, honestly. The other oak that is kind of around here that apparently you can find is the sessile oak. But the leaves of that kind of look more like the chestnut oak. So I'm pretty sure this is the English oak and not the sessile oak, but I could be wrong. And then I have this kind of remnant of an acorn. But the acorns, honestly, of this one are kind of longer. Like they're elongated. Another way to tell the sessile oak and the English oak apart is based off the length of their stalks on their leaf. So for the English oak, the stalk is going to be a lot shorter. You can see how short that stalk is. So this is definitely, I feel like, a English oak. But yeah, beyond that, kind of similar to the oaks in North America, the sessile oak and the English oak have a lot of species that depend on them. One English study found that like 326 species depends on the English oak for their survival, but it's also just a good habitat for other and food source for things like boar and mouse and stuff like that, mice and birds and bats as well for habitat. So they're very, very important trees in terms of offering things to the ecosystem that they're part of, which kind of is what makes oaks so amazing, is kind of the role that they play in the ecosystems that they inhabit. Here's what I believe is another English oak, pedunculate oak, with some sort of gall on it. Here's one that has all of its leaves out right now, seemingly. It's like it has like this completely new green shoot coming out of it too. Never finished that video, so thanks for watching.